Grazie, Presidente Colombo.
Thank you, President Colombo, and thank you for the fact that you didn't just give us a formal welcome, but you introduced the subjects of our meeting here this afternoon. You described potentials in the economy and the sort of obstacles that exist and the possible paths for the recovery of the economy. And to understand the political implications a little more, I suggest that we start with Charles Kupchan, Senior Fellow and Director of Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations of New York, and he's also the author of a book which is presented in the number of Aspenia that we're introducing today. And the idea is that it will be no one's world. The world won't belong to anyone after the decline of the U.S. influence, while other countries are acquiring greater weight, more importance in the overall scenario. There's a theory that the West draws its strength from the weakness of its political system, because as it has a state that hasn't tried to deal with everything, then intellectuals and merchants and other parts of society were able to contribute their energy to society in a way that wasn't possible in more centrally planned economies or centralized economies such as Turkey or China, or other examples would come to mind. So it would be interesting to see what will happen in the next few days. We are awaiting President Obama's State of the Union address and looking forward to some indications of what the second term of this administration will be like. The Aspenia issue starts with an interview to former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, a Democrat, a woman who went from Eastern Europe to the United States, and she says, I don't believe that the isolationist tendency is stronger now in the States than it was in the past. So this is my question to Mr. Kupchan. We've heard about the origins of the financial crisis, the financial meltdown, Lehman Brothers, and all the events that we know that led President Obama to have to deal primarily with the economic crisis and the repercussions in the United States of that crisis. How much do you think President Obama will be able to project his action, his interests in the rest of the world with a very clear-cut foreign policy? And to what extent, instead, do you think that he will have to continue to focus chiefly on domestic issues? Would you like to answer that, Professor?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Maurizio. Nice to see you again. I think that the backdrop to Obama's second term, and the previous speaker was to some extent getting at this issue, is the deeper economic and political crisis that has affected the advanced industrialized economies. And I think the core of the problem is the declining welfare of middle classes on both sides of the Atlantic, and the degree to which average Americans and average Europeans have seen their real wages decline at the same time that income inequality increases across our societies. And Obama really campaigned for re-election as someone who was going to address that issue. He found his voice in about a year before the election, in some ways as a progressive populist. One of the most catchy phrases of the campaign was, "It's time for nation building at home." And the main theme of the re-election campaign was, we will rebuild the economy from the middle class out. That means looking at the interests, trying to increase the optimism of the average American, and try to bring down inequality while raising the wages of the average American. That campaign was successful. He succeeded in reaching out to a broad swath of Americans that do feel on the short end of the stick. And I think that means that he will commit himself in the second term to the domestic front. I would say his first, second, third, fourth, and fifth priorities will be to get the economy going, to get America's own house in order. And his belief, and I believe he is correct in this, is that revitalizing the American economy, trying to breathe new life into American institutions, is essential to reinvigorating America's role abroad. Strength starts at home. Now, what does that mean? I think it means that, as I said, the focus of the second term will be on domestic issues, on trying to stimulate economic growth. I don't expect that we will see a neo-isolationism, but I do think that we will be going through a period of retrenchment in which the United States, particularly in the Middle East, has a lighter footprint, in which wars of choice will be avoided, in which the administration will be very careful about getting involved in scenarios like that presents itself in Syria. In Mali, the U.S. was very careful about getting involved. In Libya, the U.S. provided air support, intelligence support, refueling, but let the Europeans take the lead. I think that is likely to be the model for the future, with one big exception, one big unknown, and that is Iran. I think we now have a window of opportunity that is open on the negotiating front. We heard over the weekend in Munich at the security conference that the Iranians are ready to have another round of negotiations. It's anybody's guess as to whether those negotiations will work. If they do not, I think it is more than likely that there will be a war against Iran sometime in the second half of 2013 or perhaps in 2014. But the president has said repeatedly that a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. Iran seems to be expediting its enrichment facilities, increasing the quality of its centrifuges. I do worry that even though the administration will try to keep its commitments down in the Middle East and expedite the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the opposite may happen when it comes to Iran. Let me just say a few quick things about the economy, and then I will wrap up. I think that Obama has a reasonably good job of making some progress on key economic issues, getting a budget together, getting more stimulus spending, in part because the Republicans were really set back in the elections to some extent, have learned lessons. I don't think that we will see a revolutionary change in the Republican Party. My own view is that the polarization in the United States is going to get worse before it gets better. And that's because the parties are continuing to move away from each other. The Democrats to the left and the Republicans to the right. The political center in the United States today is extremely thinly populated. And that's not going to change anytime soon. But I do think that Obama is going to change his political strategy to some extent in the second term. In the first term, there were two periods. The first year and a half, in which he attempted to appeal to public opinion by going over the heads of the political establishment. That didn't work so well because it didn't yield progress in Congress. The second half of the term, he tried to work through Congress, but he held back from direct involvement, and he let the congressional leaders try to cut deals. That didn't work so well either. What I think we're beginning to see now is a combination of the strategy of the first year. That is to say, he will go out to the American public, as he's doing several times a week now, on the economy, on gun control, on immigration, and give speeches to try to mobilize public opinion, but he is wedding that popular strategy to a specific legislative strategy. And so even though I don't think you will see new broad cooperation between Republicans and Democrats, I do think that you will see discrete deals on a narrow set of issues because Obama is finally getting in the trenches, taking the lead on putting together legislative coalitions, going out into the public to put pressure on Republicans through their own constituencies to make progress on some of these key issues. So I do think there's a certain optimism today about getting some breakthroughs in Congress. And then one final issue that leads me to be cautiously optimistic is the prospective boom in oil and gas. Gas prices in the United States are extremely low compared to the rest of the world. That is going to help American industry and American manufacturing. I think fracking is soon going to have a similar impact on oil production in the United States and Canada. We're looking at a likely decrease in both gas and oil prices worldwide. That's going to help stimulate growth in the United States. It also will have a positive knock-on effect on the climate change issue, simply because we'll see power stations move from coal to gas. At the same time, I think it makes climate change legislation less likely in the sense of some type of cap and trade system, simply because the constituencies that will be pushing against that are now going to grow as a result of increasing production of gas and oil. So it's not going to be an easy 4 years. The polarization is likely to be almost as bad as it was in the first term, but I do think that we will see more discrete deals, more progress on the economic front, and a foreign policy that is still one of broad engagement, even as it to some extent becomes more selective and more judicious. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kupchan.